Welcome back to a brand new episode of Charm City Beat. As we said, this is over the next 2 weeks. We're going to be recapping the 2020 season as well as looking ahead, in which is by far one of the weirdest football seasons any of us have ever encountered. We still have to talk about it, and it starts with Saturday night.
Yeah, that's one of the Ravens losses that people are going to be talking about for a long time. I personally don't have it on the same pedestal as last year's loss to the Titans or the 2006 loss to the Colts, or even 2011 when Billy Cundiff missed that kick and Lee Evans dropped that pass in the end zone. I feel like those are massive games, and the team was supposed to do really well, and they didn't perform in that game. This year, I felt like the Ravens came in, they were an underdog the entire time. And so you went in thinking they could lose this football game. But the way they did it was a little bit disheartening, a little bit depressing. The whole game felt like they were just sludging through mud. I mean, Justin Tucker's missing 2 field goals. That never happens.
Never.
But Wayne, what was your opinion of this football game, and what did you feel like walking away from it?
I mean, so it's weird to me. Like, number one, I always get nervous with Ravens primetime games. I don't know what it is. I just feel like, especially with the last 3 years, primetime games haven't been the best games, but they've also been some of the best. It's weird. This team can either have the best primetime games or the absolute worst in NFL history. And what you got, in my opinion, was one of the worst offensive games in primetime football history, in my opinion. Defensive-wise, I thought we were amazing. In fact, I hope that everybody on that defense, and this is also wishful speaking, can make it on that defense next year. Maybe a few upgrades here and there, plug and play. But I'm satisfied with our defense. Again, I felt like watching that defense reminded me of the Ravens defenses of old that just controlled the game. I mean, they held one of the best offenses in the NFL in 2020 to 10 points. Honestly, outside of a few missed field goals and a horrible interception in the end zone, this game, we wouldn't be filming this specific episode. We would actually be talking about our game against Kansas City, but that is not the case here. Unfortunately, we had 2 missed field goals, as you said, and Lamar just in offense just not playing the way that we've seen him play. But, yeah, to me, it left me with a lot of questions on the offensive side, a lot of answers on the defense side. I think we'll be fine, but offensively, there's too many questions to ask at this point.
Yeah, I thought the last 5 games after the COVID and the playoff win against Tennessee, we're all thinking, hey, the offense figured it out. But it seemed like this game against the Bills, all those issues that plagued this team pre-COVID, when they were stumbling against teams like New England and Tennessee and Pittsburgh, barely beating Philly, the bad snaps, the inability to protect Lamar Jackson for more than 2 frickin' seconds, receivers not getting open, elementary play calling, the occasional drop pass. I felt like that compounded with plays like Sam Cook's punt that went 20 yards and a relatively bad day for Justin Tucker. Considering the wind, I think he actually had decent kicks. That just, the wind played havoc with these kickers, unfortunately. Yeah. And I think that's part of the reason why the Bills' offense couldn't get going either. They just couldn't throw it. But the Ravens' offense, the little things compounded, just was a disaster for this Baltimore football team. And they got to fix that.
I mean, in the last few weeks, you saw a team that you were thinking, well, yeah, we ran a lot. But you're like, this is a team that's running very well that could definitely run its way through the Super Bowl. But, I mean, the Bills stopping the run was the biggest issue for me. I mean, you virtually forced Lamar Jackson and that shady-ass offensive line to have to pass downfield. And it just wasn't there. Again, you had the weather. You had Macari snapping the ball, back 30 yards? I mean,
it got him hurt.
Yeah, it got Lamar hurt. And again, I'm sure Lamar's going to be good to go next year. He's got the next 8 months to think about it. But, it was embarrassing. It really was. I know, the Bills, honestly, I agree with you. It wasn't the same type of feeling when they lost, last year. To me, last year's loss, that hurt. Maybe because I was there in person. I don't know. But that loss last year, that hurt, still stung me. And everything was validated last week when we beat them. But this year, I don't know. Honestly, I feel like it exposed us. It was one of those moments where I think it allowed the Ravens fans, the coaching hopefully, and the players to look within themselves and say, hey, this is the issues. These are the issues that we have. And if we don't fix this, we'll never make it to a conference championship, let alone a Super Bowl. So I'm hoping that things get better. I'm hearing, and I don't want to go too far into a lot of, rumors about what's going to happen, but from the press conference John Harbaugh did today, he did seem to allude to the fact that our coordinators would be back. And there's a lot of Ravens fans watching right now that are like, what the fuck, bullshit. Yeah, that's the situation at hand. Greg Roman could be back. And, of course, he's public enemy number one in the 410 and 301. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, Harbaugh definitely, they could change their mind. I think they still have to go down to Florida where they meet with Bisciotti and this all might be virtual this year, but usually the owner and the GM and the coaches all get together and they huddle. And Bisciotti is very open with his thoughts on this football team. He usually stays out of it. When the season ends, he's involved. And I feel like maybe Roman will be back. I think they've got to work on some stuff if he is. This is a team that, as Hollywood Brown alluded to after that football game, they were first against the run and 32nd in the pass offensively. That's just so bad when you consider that even if they were like 17th in the pass, they would be in the Super Bowl because they're talking about how balanced that is. But when you can put 8 guys, 9 guys in the box in a meaningful football game and you have the elements of January, you're not winning the football game, no matter how good your defense is.
Yeah, again, January football for the Ravens historically has actually been halfway decent, at least in the early part of the last decade. There's a reason why they call Joe Flacco January Joe. We're not going to spend too much time on him because that's the past. But I don't know if this Ravens team, at least this year, was built for January. I don't think so. I think we were built to beat the Titans, and that's what it seemed like. That was the end game. It was like we beat the Titans, we got revenge for last year, and who cares about what else? But it just seemed like, at least on the offensive side of the ball, there just wasn't a lot of connections. Again, the Bills played a good defense. They beat us. They did what they had to do to beat us, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm hoping that they can bounce back next year and at least come up with a better game plan. Maybe a different passing game coordinator, something to alleviate the horrible passing game that we have. 32nd. I don't know if the Ravens statistically have ever been 32nd in a lot of things. I don't know what the history on that is. I'll have to look that up. But 32nd in passing that's just embarrassing for any playoff team. You're a playoff team. You should not be 32nd in passing.
Yeah, it's the same situation, I think, in 2003. I don't know where they sat when they had Kyle Bohr and some of those quarterbacks, but when Jamal Lewis was running haymaker on everybody, they weren't passing the ball very well, and that was the season that ended against Titans in the first round. After that great year, they won the division. I think the same thing this year. They're not balanced, so they've got to have everything go perfect. You can't be throwing historically long interception returns for touchdowns in a football game, and you need to score a touchdown to tie. That was the football game right there.
That was.
You can kick a field goal, they probably still win that football game, I think.
Yeah. That interception, you could almost see the just air deflate out of the team. I'm pretty sure me and my wife watched at home. I remember, are you kidding? In that moment, with the way they were playing, the missed kicks, it was like there's no way of coming back. And, I'm not even bad-mouthing my team. I'm just talking facts. That honestly was the nail in the coffin, in my opinion. And then Lamar getting the concussion, it was just like, well, that's it. But there was a little promise. Tyler Huntley came in and he went off, and he looked pretty good out there. I'm not gonna lie, for a practice squad guy. That was nothing short of spectacular. I wish he could have concluded that with a touchdown, but it is what it is. But yeah, I definitely think the biggest issue for the Ravens is the passing game. If Lamar Jackson can't become a consistent passer, sadly, I don't think we're going to win a Super Bowl. I love Lamar Jackson. I think he's a great leader. I think he's one of the most elusive quarterbacks in NFL history. I think he's a true improviser when needs to. The things he can do in that pocket, getting out of, sacks, is just spectacular. But we have got to step up the passing game, and it does start with Lamar, actually. I'm hoping maybe this offseason, the receivers, Lamar, they can get safely, COVID safely, they can get together and build that chemistry, because without it, you might as well be prepared to go one and done again, or at least two and done again next year.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds because this is our next conversation for our next piece, but, they do get Ronnie Stanley back, so all of a sudden your other left tackle in Leonard Brown will shift over. Bradley Bozeman's back. They're probably going to draft a center, just a good one in Oklahoma. So you're talking about, maybe building a really good offensive line. That's the biggest issue. And then defensively, even if they beat the Bills, I didn't see them beating Kansas City because they just can't get a pass rush. And they're probably going to lose Matt Judon, so we'll see what they do there, too. I think that's an issue. Who you're going to re-sign, Ngakoue or Judon? Do you dress it in the pat? Do you dress it? Their cap room, they don't have a lot of cap room, so it might have to come in the draft. A lot of questions, a lot of excitement. Unfortunately, a couple games too early.
Yeah. This is definitely something I expected to be talking about maybe in like 3 weeks. I didn't expect mid-January we'd be doing a recap episode, but, it is what it is. But speaking of recap, it was a very interesting season. A season like no other. You had a virtual draft where, Roger Goodell is virtually half drunk on TV in his basement calling the drafts picks. You had no training camp, which that's big, especially for rookies who have never played at NFL speed before. Again, and then on top of that, they had no preseason, so you had a lot of guys going in with cold feet. It's COVID, so a lot of places are locked down. A lot of facilities, at least in the mid part of the year, weren't open. So, training just wasn't something that probably was a priority for a lot of players. But again, that's the same for every NFL team. That wasn't unique to the Ravens. Every NFL team, including the Kansas City Chiefs, who are in the AFC Championship, and the Bills, who are in the AFC Championship, had to do the exact same thing. The Ravens, unfortunately, I think there were just too many mistakes throughout the season, and especially in last game. But just too many mistakes that we can definitely fix, but that just crushed us underneath.
Yeah, and the fact that fans couldn't go to football games was also a big-time bummer for us because we go to all these games. But I think the Ravens have one of those teams, I think, that really, especially offensively, feeds off the crowd. So when their offense is rolling, the defense is rolling, and the crowd's going, that's why they're such a good home team. And they didn't have that this year either. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that's why they lost so many football games, but they probably would have had a slightly better record, maybe hosted around game. Who knows?
I agree 100%. And it's one of those things. Going back talking about this season, you have a situation where certain states have certain guidelines, and certain stadiums were allowed to have fans, and others weren't. And I'm not saying that was ever a factor. I'm not trying to create bullshit excuses. We're not going to sit here and create excuses for the Ravens. But in my opinion, I said it from the beginning that if you're going to do no fans for some stadiums, do it for all. Just level the playing field completely. Let that happen. Of course, that didn't. I don't know how much the audience, the fans being there in Buffalo played a part in this. They were louder than I thought they were going to be, actually. Hearing them on TV, and it was one of the things where I was like, is this like, the ESPN or whatever, is this the crowd noise that they pump into the TV, or is this legit noise that you're getting? It was the first time I felt like I had ever actually heard a crowd this year. It was crazy. So I don't know. That probably could have played into it, but nonetheless, here we are. One thing I did want to talk about is the rushing game. When you look back at that running game, what was last year a three-headed dragon became, towards the end, a two-headed dragon, and a very vicious one at that. You have J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, who, in my opinion, probably is one of the best evolved running backs out of the whole group because he adapted. He was catching passes out of the backfield. He was being more shifty, not just running straight. He was becoming a more dynamic back, which gives me so much confidence in him being obviously one of the main rushers, if not the leading rusher. If J.K. Dobbins is in it. But Mark Ingram is out. That's no secret. Mark Ingram is gone. We're going to miss his energy. Honestly, in my opinion, the heartbeat of the team the last few years, just that emotional, drive that I think we're going to miss. But, yeah, what do you think of the running backs group this year?
Yeah, I felt like honestly, we didn't want Ingram to play anymore after halfway through the year when his first down runs he was having were going for 1 or 2 yards or no yards, and it was like, what are they doing with this guy? So they eventually did bite the bullet and not play him anymore, which I think is what needed to happen. And Dobbins and Gus stepped up. I think next year you see Dobbins come out and really handle that football and that rock. And I think they're going to end up being, if Hunt and Chubb are the premier duo back in the NFL, I think Dobbins and Gus are going to be right there, right behind them. But when you throw in Lamar Jackson, I think that they've got 3,000 yards rushing, run them all over him again.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think they could be a very, very dynamic duo. I mean, they just showed it in the last few games that they were essentially given the keys to that running game, what they did. Now, again, obviously, the biggest issue, there was a lot of controversy with the passing game. Our receivers, I mean, they were there, here and there moments. But you had Hollywood Brown going on Twitter, blasting the coaching staff, talking about soldiers and not using weapons and this, that, and the other. And with Hollywood, it was one of the things where he started to impress me towards the end. In the beginning, I wasn't impressed. I was like, you're running your mouth, and you're literally dropping every pass Lamar's throwing to you. You're not doing much. But towards the end, I felt like they got more of a connection. Would have wished they would have had a pre-COVID connection, like, before that COVID outbreak.
Right.
But, what more can we ask for? I'm hoping that, he hasn't – I've long suspected, and I've told you this before, I feel like that tweet and even the most recent tweet, it's easy to talk yourself out of the NFL, or at least out of your, off your team. I don't think they'll get rid of him or trade him away, but it could be an option down the road. Say they get a decent enough receiver in free agency.
Yeah, it reeks of shades of his cousin, Antonio Brown.
Yeah.
And I mean, he definitely played well down the stretch. I mean, he strung together a bunch of big-time games. It's back-to-back playoff games. Last year's Titans game, this year's Titans game, where he went over 100 yards. But he's still a mismatch in a bad way when it comes to throwing outside the numbers. He's not physical. You've got to almost get him pre-snap running to get him the ball. He's not physical like Tyreek Hill, which I think is what the Ravens envisioned when they drafted him out of Oklahoma in the first round a few years ago. So, I mean, they've got to go. I mean, he's not the answer to Lamar Jackson. They've got to go out and get a guy. Harbaugh even said today they'd love to have an Anquan Bolden-type player, but they're not going to go out of their way to get him here, and they've got to be willing to block and maybe not get the amount of passes that you might get if you go to the Houston Texans. So, I mean, to me, that's an issue. The Ravens aren't really – it sounds like they're not willing to change the way they're playing. To a point, they shouldn't. But if they really want to get these guys like Robinson from the Bears, or they're not going to get them by talking about running the ball a million times. So they've got to figure out that passing offense and how to get these guys involved, because if he had Stephon Diggs, the Ravens would never lose a football game. And that's the God's honest truth. That's why these guys are doing so well, like Mahomes.
Yeah, they have number one receivers. And, again, when you look at Hollywood Brown, I mean, not knocking the guy. I mean, you've seen he has potential. He has the speed. Jeez, he's one of the fastest receivers in the NFL, just probably based off of just straight running. But when you look at Hollywood, I don't even think he's broken 200 pounds. He's like 5'9", 5'8". We're talking about a little guy. And that, in my opinion, he's the perfect slot receiver. I think he could be a very decent slot receiver. He gets better at that route tree instead of just running the 9. I think, Hollywood is a one-trick pony at the current moment. You either get him on the 9 route or do some stuff in the backfield with hitch plays or whatever. And I don't think that's going to be the key to winning. Yeah, you're right. We're going to have to get a receiver. And John Harbaugh, I watched the press conference as well. He was, I feel like he put on a face. And it's the face I feel like he's had to put on the last few seasons, because there's so many questions around the passing game where he has to say, if you don't want to come here, don't come here. We don't need you. We look forward to lining up against you. That's, I feel like, what he has to say. And it's not wrong. It isn't. Because, again, you don't want someone that doesn't want to be here. That's how you get, that poison in the locker room that they talk about. You don't want a person that's mad because he's not getting the passes that he should be getting when the passing game just isn't opening up. That's just not what you want. So I get it from the point of view of, just John trying to keep, unity in the locker room and just positivity and keeping out the bad juju. But, yeah, no pun intended there. But I just think John honestly should start selling the team a little bit more. Like, hey, just start pitching to the Robinsons. There's a lot of guys that are going to be free agent receivers coming up. Of course, we know which one we want and which half of Ravens Nation wants, but you got to sell it. You got to sell it. If you want to improve the game, you just got to sell yourself.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess what he did say that is if you want to win football games, if you want to play with an MVP quarterback, come to Baltimore. And you will win football games.
Yeah.
But it's to be seen if we're going to win once the calendar turns to the next year.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest issue, and that's another question mark. And he did finally win a football game. So to me, it was a successful season in that regard, because that was the biggest question mark is can we win a football game? Now it's can we get past the divisional round?
Yeah.
So I'm not Super Bowl or bust. I'm AFC Championship or bust now at this point. That's me personally. It's just another step, and if we get to the championship game, odds are we're going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So we'll find out.
I agree. I mean, you start with year one, the horrible loss to the Chargers, and then you have year two, the loss to the Titans. But again, that from year one to year two, you went to the divisional. So there's progress. Of course, this year we finally got that win, divisional. Yeah, I agree with you, man. If we go to AFC Championship, I don't see us not getting in. But again, that's all dependent on the fact that passing game has to improve. And in that line, I think, people can bash Lamar, and they, ESPN does a great job of it. So, obviously we're not going to sit here and do that. We'll admit that, yes, consistency does need to be a thing going forward. There needs to be consistency. That's key. But it does start up front. I definitely think, EDC's got his ear to the ground. I definitely there's some potential out there in the draft. We'll talk about that next week. There's free agents that are going to be out there. You can plug and play guys. Ronnie Stanley comes back. Hopefully, you got a decent enough looking O-line, I think, to protect Lamar. That's going to be the biggest thing in 2021 is protecting Lamar, getting that passing game going, and, getting back to the playoffs. So far, we've made it to the playoffs every single year. Lamar Jackson's been at the head of this team after not being in the playoffs for years. I'll consider this a successful season, in my opinion. We weren't supposed to be here. When the outbreak happened and we were losing games, they counted us out. We weren't supposed to be there, but here we are. We won a game.
Yep.
We got to the divisional. We had, honestly, under different weather conditions, I think that's a closer game against Josh Allen and the Bills. But you know what? Best of luck to them. Hope they do go off and beat the Chiefs. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that. I know you may disagree, but I don't have a problem.
I'm with you because I personally don't think we would have beaten the Chiefs after what I just watched. So even if we would have beaten the Bills, I think the Bills are actually built better to beat the Chiefs because they have an offense that can put up 50 points.
Sorry.
And all the respect to them for sending all that money to Lamar Jackson's charity after he got hurt. I mean, more respect for Bills Mafia this week than I had this time last week. I'll say that.
Ever. And that's the thing. Like Bills Mafia, you're used to them. It's almost like if you remember the old ECW, like just burning tables and slamming them across tables. It's literally like backyard wrestling out there at their games. Like you're like, who the hell are these people? But no, their hearts are in the right place. And again, I wish the Bills the best of luck. They're definitely who I'm pulling for, and going forward. I hope it's a Bills versus Green Bay Packers Super Bowl. That would be great to see. Just new faces in the Super Bowl. One old one returning back. I would love to see that. Just a new age Super Bowl. And the Bills,
I personally, I'm sorry.
Go. Yeah, you're good.
No, I was hoping Tom Brady would go back and beat the Bills one last freaking time and just rip their hearts out on national. Can you imagine?
Oh my God! Like, I feel like the city of Buffalo would implode if that happened. Here they are, like we got rid of Tom Brady. He's out of the division, and here he is in the Super Bowl. Oh my God, that would be. I
would pay money for that. Yeah.
If that happened, I mean, any given Sunday, it's possible. That would be very interesting. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to wish them bad luck because they are. The Bills, I feel like, are a good team. I don't want to wish them bad luck.
They would lose that game, too. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, God. That does it for our show. Again, like I said, this is a two-part special. We will have part two where we look ahead to next year. 2021 is here. There's a lot. After the Super Bowl, it gets real busy in those front offices. You'll see people moving around. It's an exciting time of the year, and we're going to get you ready for it. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay tuned to Charm City B. We got a lot of content coming for you. Take care. And cut.